Welcome to the Sensory Empower podcast. I'm Bethany, your host. I'm a holistic occupational therapist with over a decade of experience in supporting individuals helping to transform their world through sensory empowerment. This podcast is your guide to the transformative world of sensory storytelling, holistic tools, and empowerment strategies. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sensory Empower, the podcast. Today, we're going to dive a little bit more into sensory profiles, empathy, considerations of that compassion that kicks in. And we've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast because I feel like it is so deeply powerful to come from this sensory lens. And I'm going to share a few kind of client wins that have occurred recently when working with clients and doing parent coaching. And we're going to title this episode Sensory Profiles, Compassion, and Seeing Ourselves and Others Through a New Lens. So this consideration of what it may look like. And I'm Bethany, I'm your host. I'm an occupational therapist. I love educating about sensory information, nervous system. I'm deeply passionate about supporting families and adults to help understand their nervous system as they move through the world and learning different techniques and tools to reflect on the sensation changes in our body, those beautiful interoceptive cues that are the reminders that something is happening and there's a state shift in our body to where it feels empowering instead of overwhelming. And today we're going to talk about kind of something that sits really in prominent view when I am supporting clients. The heart of sensory education is compassion. We're providing and supporting these moments of deep reflection, the lens of sensory education that builds in this compassion and deeper understanding from this lens of how are we processing sound and touch and taste and movement? Do I need more movement throughout the day, or do I get overstimulated by certain movements? And building in this compassion, not just for children, but for compassion for the community, the people around us. And most important, this is internal self-reflection of compassion for myself. So this episode is going to dive a little bit into some self-reflections that I have as a provider, some self-reflections that I have moving through my own process of having a sensory profile change, and some client wins of thinking about those powerful shifts that can occur, and the really lovely recent experiences that I've had working with a few families where they start to learn this deeper level of analysis and really honing in on sensory integration techniques, nervous system strategies, nervous system education, and understanding different states. So am I in a sympathetic state? Am I in fight or flight? Am I really loud? Is that a response that happens a lot of the time if I get dysregulated? Or do I have a more of like a nervous system shutdown state of freeze? Those considerations, and there's some interesting, new research coming out with the polyvagal theory, which is created by Dr. Stephen Porges. And they're doing some interesting kind of systematic reviews of the polyvagal theory. So that'll be one that we might dive into a little bit further on the next episode of like, what's the new updates on the polyvagal theory? But when we're thinking about like functional observations, I still feel like it's really, really valuable technique to think about different state shifts throughout the day. How it relates to sensory profiles in so many different ways. If we have a small little espresso cup and it overflows much, much faster, we're more likely to shift our nervous system state into a hypervigilance state. So that loud noise telling my reptilian brain, danger, bear is here, fight mode, or deer in headlights, I'm stuck, freeze mode. So when we break it down to thinking about nervous system responses and the interconnection with sensory profile differences, especially in the family, if there are different sensory profiles, which is super, super common that I see. We've got the loud sensory seekers that really love input and block out other input by making their own sounds or their own extra movements to help meet that really big cup. And then we may have those little espresso cups that get overloaded in the contrast of that loud, rambunctious, energetic sensations, and maybe sensory cups that are really small get overloaded and go into freeze shutdown, where we're just kind of stuck, or I'm kind of retreating away and I'm not quite sure how to proceed and engage because it's just like overpowering energy in the home. That's one of the quotes that sensory sensitive mom that I just worked with. She was just like, it really is so insightful to recognize within myself as things are starting to shift, important it is to listen to those internal cues. Heart rate is a big one. Breath rate is a big one. Hands, what are our hands doing? Are they going into a tight fist? Are they relaxed and open? Are they extra fidgety? That also can be a really nice clue into, something is shifting. And so we can think about that connection with family, right? And the family dynamics from this sensory and nervous system lens. And can it start to like interpret the way behavior starts to change? I think absolutely. I think this education facet of brainstorming scenarios and doing deep dives into situations where there's been different sensory needs in the household and different sensory needs in the community, like going out to a park, going to a birthday party. One we just chatted about is like problem solving, going to a birthday party at the like jump, like the trampoline place. So lots of movement, lots of visual stimulation, lots of vestibular input, lots and lots of auditory, because as for some nervous systems and those that really like that up and down movement, it actually can kind of escalate into louder voices. We could actually overflow our cup and be a little bit dysregulated if we've had too much jumping. So these are all just considerations when we're thinking about that community engagement and how families are engaging at home and coming up with those solutions that help to meet the needs of the entirety of the sensory profiles in the household. So brainstorming. So when we think about like a question that I sometimes prompt with families or prompt myself when I'm thinking about my own nervous system, what might their nervous system being experiencing right now? Or the self-reflection mirror question to myself, what is my nervous system experiencing right now as I move through the day? And this is a nice pause moment as you're listening, just to take a little mindful moment and think about your heart rate. It's beating fast or slow. Maybe you feel it strongly or you don't feel it at all. You can actually put your hand on your heart and see if there's a sensation. If it is hard to locate, it's maybe a curiousness to think about using some different techniques. Maybe there's a watch or a heart rate monitor or a pulse ox. Those sorts of things can help us ID our heart rate at resting. Can be really helpful. And then I want you to think about your lungs and your breath rate. And if you are breathing shallow, if you have deeper breaths, if you are in a chest breathing versus a belly breathing. That's also another curious, mindful tool that I encourage families to do, just like a breath check throughout the day. Because when we think about a dog panting, they're stressed, right? So that shallow, fast chest breathing, panting, as a dog maybe as an example, is typically a sign of overstimulation and attempt to regulate. For a dog, right? They're trying to calm down or they're overheated or they're really excited. When we think about a dog sleeping, their chest is doing a lot slower, deeper breathing. And when we think about our breathing, could we even activate our vagus nerve right at our diaphragm by doing deep breathing? That's why deep breathing can be so incredibly powerful. We've got our vagus nerve, our 10th cranial nerve that runs through our body and stimulates all of our parasympathetic organs. So my breathing, my heart, my digestion, going all the way down into my intestines. I mean, there's so much that this vagus nerve, it's a very profound nerve in our body. It's also like our calm down nerve. And so if we could activate our calm down nerve because there's a lot of end points or innervations, we call it, at our diaphragm, which is like that muscle when you have a hiccup, right? That hiccup muscle that we call it sometimes, right underneath your rib cage. So as we breathe in and as we breathe out, we're nourishing through that deep breathing that vagus nerve. So that's kind of that neuroscience and thinking about the nervous system and nerve activation in a really cool way, a little bit behind the scenes when we do those deep breaths. And so consideration, and if you've done your kind of body check, what do you notice in your nervous system? Are you a little bit more activated with more of a shallow breath or faster heartbeat? Is your nervous system maybe a little bit more calm now, a slower beat, or not necessarily feeling your heartbeat pounding out of your chest? Is your breath rate slowing down? And this is maybe a 1 to 2 minute exercise that you could try throughout your day. This is one that I really feel can be extremely accessible for many individuals, kids and adults alike, myself included. I use this one very, very frequently throughout my day. A little body check-in, right? We're just tapping into the curiousness. So we think about the powerful reflections we can have with a new lens, right? Considerations of why maybe this work can be so incredibly important. So I had a recent client and we've put on pause because they're doing absolutely wonderful on following through on home program and seeing some really great growth in their home with their children. And this mom shared just such a beautiful kind of comprehensive example, I feel like. So this sensory and nervous system education, providing her with an alternative lens. I think that's the key word there is we're pausing, we're thinking about the world with compassion from a totally different way that maybe we've never thought about the world. So this sensory and nervous system state lens to help better understand not only her children, but herself. And when she shared that on email, I really had a beautiful moment of pause because I feel like this sentence captures the entire foundation of what I'm trying to support families with. A new lens, not a new parenting strategy, not a behavior chart, not a quick fix. It's a new way of seeing and putting on those goggles. And when we get to understand in a different perspective, this alternative perspective, as the example was provided, sensory processing and nervous system states, there can be such a powerful recognition with many of the reactions in ourself and others. So when we think about this nervous system moving through different sensations, different times of day, different levels of alertness. Did I sleep well? Did I not sleep well? The whole impact on just alertness and arousal level, we can call it as well. Like, am I alert and engaged? Am I way high into that high alert state? Or am I in this really low state where I'm having a hard time, maybe yawning, and I can't quite get my system into this optimal state of arousal or alertness? So we think about like nervous system experiencing in different environments. Are there different environments like the trampoline park, for example, that we did some brainstorming with that flip individuals' nervous systems into this really heightened state? And sometimes, ooh, that was way too much for a little sensory cut. Now I'm hiding in the bathroom and I'm screaming and I'm overwhelmed. How do I bring it back to return back to that community and social time and back into that activated, this what we call social engaged, or our ventral vagal states, or our vagus nerve in the front part of our branch? How do I get back to that state? Are there precursors? Are there little warning signs in our body before we've totally moved to this overload? And I'm out, I'm in flight mode. I got to get away from this sound. I got to get away from this loud noise. I got to get away from this experience of observing other people jump a lot and get really loud. And so can we start to have those pre-warning signs be clearer? And that's really a lot of the brainstorming that I love to do with families, is when we start to understand that foundation in wherever they are, in the home, in the community, this compassion and understanding can grow very naturally. It's really beautiful. So considerations of sensory profiles, we've kind of talked about that. So every single day, Our brain is processing information, it's modulating and organizing and categorizing in our brain. So our sound and light and movement, touch, smell, visual input, body awareness, my head movement in space, my vestibular system, and of course, my internal sensations, our interoceptive system. Our vagus nerve is our huge supporter to help us understand the sensations of hunger, fatigue, emotional shifts. And every person processes this information a little bit differently. Some nervous systems notice everything really quickly. Some take in information a little bit more gradually. Some systems feel most balanced when the environment is really calm or very predictable. And others regulate when there's movement, activity, or novelty. None of those patterns are right or wrong. It's just simply a part of how each nervous system is wired. And so I often explain to families when this consideration of that small espresso cup and the really big cup, thinking about the sensory cup analysis. So we're thinking about nervous system connection with different sensory processing facets throughout the day. So every sound, every conversation, every bright light, every emotional or social interaction adds a little bit to the cup. If you have a really big cup, usually you're wanting more input. If you have a little cup, that cup can fill up really, really quickly. And for many, if we've got a really big cup, it fills really slowly and they might need tons of input to actually feel alert and engaged. So that's another curiousness. We have our low registration profile that misses a lot of input throughout the day, and they might need a lot of extra cues to, whoop, you called my name, whoop, we're doing something, to have a response to things. So we're thinking about this understanding of sensory differences and how it can so deeply connect in family relationships, in community, and friendship, and how important it can be to understand and build in this compassion and empathy. Because if two people have different sensory thresholds, they may experience the same environment in very different ways. And we think about a loud family gathering as an example, or that jumping birthday party experience where it might feel exciting for one kid and overwhelming for another. And so navigating and starting to recalibrate, identify those pre-warnings before, that's the beautiful magic. So we think about this sensory lens and putting on those goggles and thinking about understanding and having this compassion towards others. Be really, really beautiful. So in this consideration of building compassion through sensory awareness, I just want to reiterate, when we understand that everyone has a unique sensory profile, how they process different information, it really can be beautiful to take a perspective, a little step back, and hold space for the differences and bring in a deep level of understanding. So maybe there's a child who's covering their ears in a noisy room. They're not being dramatic. They are literally overflowed too much for ears. Maybe an adult who needs quiet time after social interactions might simply be allowing their sensory cup to empty and reboot. And these are just patterns, right? These are patterns where we can brainstorm. And when families start to learn these techniques to help with resetting the system, it really is really, really awesome to see the engagement, the participation, and really starting to extend that same compassion to their self that they offer to their children when I'm working with families in particular. And I feel like this can be a really beautiful ripple effect that we'll kind of finish this podcast talking about, of the realizations, the discovering of new sensory patterns for the parent. And really, as they begin upon this journey, really the deep desire is I really want to help my child. And it becomes this beautiful ripple effect of oh wow, I am thinking about my childhood as a parent, or even myself as a provider. I think about all of the sensory needs I had when I was a child. And we think about oh man, these self-reflection moments of I didn't realize how much noise affects my focus. And gosh, I see now why I really needed to have alone time to reset after really busy days. This is self-awareness. It's this foundational understanding. And it really can bring so much beautiful ripple effect and impact. So we think about those reflections, the patterns, rather than isolated situations. Are there certain environments where your child or you are getting overwhelmed? Is there movement needs at certain times of the day? You feel more regulated after quiet time, nature, movement. These patterns can offer some really valuable cues and a clue into what the sensory experience is needed. So there might be, and I always am loving talking about sensory systems from a deep, beautiful reflection of open sharing. So you might say, my ears need a quiet break. Your body looks like it might need a little bit of movement. Do you want to go do this or this? You want to go swing or do you want to go jump? Wow, this room is really loud today. I think I'm going to go step outside for a moment. So being able to acknowledge and take action and give those models, these simple statements, my sensory needs throughout the day. It also offers choices, right? And some beautiful choices. So quiet, movement, connection, whatever those are just some examples. So coming back to this beautiful foundation of the alternative lens of what Sensory Empower can do and support you in your home. I also offer virtual parent coaching if this is a strategy that you're hoping to learn a little bit more in depth about, so we can become more patient and more curious and be supportive and curious and compassionate towards the people around us. And perhaps most importantly, more gentle and compassionate towards ourselves. So just some closing thoughts as we finish and wrap up this podcast. The nervous system is very unique in each individual. Every sensory profile tells a story about how someone experiences the world. When we get to slow down and listen to these beautiful stories and learn more about these stories, we get to build these relationships that are grounded in empathy rather than in expectation. So today I invite you to carry this question with you. What might my nervous system need right now? So you could ask your child, you could ask yourself, you could ask your partner. And thinking about these observations and curiosities as lifelong practice of compassion. So thank you so much for being here as we continue to explore the beautiful complexity of our nervous system and sensory profile differences. And if this conversation resonated with you, please feel free to share with someone who might benefit listening and enjoying. If you'd like some more support, education, if you want to find and connect in community, please send me an email at bethany@sensoryempower.com. I will love to share some of the offerings that I have. Until next time, checking in with your sensory cup and remembering that your nervous system deserves understanding too. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for joining me on this sensory adventure through Sensory Empower, the podcast. Remember, empowerment begins with awakening your senses. Subscribe now and embark on a journey of self-discovery and transformation. Until next time, may your senses guide you towards a life filled with peace, joy, and empowerment. Because true empowerment begins with embracing your senses.